So we're here at Interbike with Jim Mayer, founder and engineer of Quarq. We're here to talk about the new power meters. Please give us a quick overview.
All right. Well, we've got a crankset-based power meter. The power meter itself has strain gauges in the crank spider. So behind the Qs in there is where all the magic happens. Measures the torque placed on the chain rings, so that's both sides, both legs. I got a measurement pod here that samples the strain gauges and then transmits that data on AMP Plus Sport to our head unit. AMP Plus Sport is a new technology. It's owned by Garmin. It's kind of like Bluetooth for bicycles, and it defines a format for how power meters and speed sensors and heart rate straps communicate with bike computers. And so our power meter works with our Cranium head unit and also with the Garmin 705.
How similar or dissimilar is the system to SRM?
Well, in the basic structure, it's very similar in that it's in the spider, so we bolt up to production cranksets. The cranksets you see here are very similar to the cranksets that SRM is using. It uses strain gauges, so you have this similar sort of accuracy. And then now we're wireless as opposed to the older SRM systems, although they have announced their new wireless system, which incidentally is also AMP Plus Sport, which puts our crankset measurement sensor, it's cross-compatible with the SRM systems.
You see a few different cranksets here, Rotor, FSA, Truvative. Which systems is Quarq compatible with?
Yeah, well, we've got the down here, we've got the FSA Chrono, the Rotor system, Truvative, FSA Team Issue, also the Cannondale Hologram, the Cybex Sports. One that's not shown that we are looking at compatibility with is the Specialized S-Works Carbon. And then we're also at the show looking at different manufacturers and finding everyone that we can bolt up to. So we're really all about openness. We really like AMP Plus Sport because it gives people choices in the head units that they can use. And then we also want to mate up with as many cranksets as possible. Everything here is 130 millimeter bolt circle, but we'll be doing a 110 and then also looking at track versions and all that. Okay.
Tell us about the software side.
Yeah, well, the Cranium is the high-end bike. It's the Mac Daddy of all bike computers. Large graphical display. It can be in portrait mode like this, or it can also rotate landscape and change all the screen will rotate. We've got a couple different mounts for it, but the big thing is that this runs Linux and has an open source software package, which means that the screen is very customizable. There's a little XML file that you can do to adjust what's on the screen, but you can program that in to show whatever you want. It's got GPS, the AMP Plus Sport. It receives analog heart rate straps as well as the ANT heart rate straps, and we'll be working on developing a community of developers around this device to build new software, to do new things with it, and we're really excited about that.
And even before that happens, this is compatible with cycling peaks, so
that's
power
correct.
meters are familiar with that system.
Yeah, so it's even if you're not into open source and you're not a computer programmer, it comes out of the box. Linux doesn't have to mean anything to you. You put it on the handlebar, it runs, it does power, it does intervals really nicely, downloads to WKO, it's got GPS in it, so that location data is there with all your training. I think it's a real good step forward.
And one last question. Tell us about the setup. Some power meters have a fairly complex setup requiring a lot of input on your part in testing. What's the setup procedure with Quarq?
Well, we're doing a lot of work to minimize that as much as possible. Overall, an install, once the Synco is installed on the crank, which is usually a lock ring or a few bolts on the back, it's like a regular crankset. Bottom bracket just goes in. Nothing new or special there. There's one magnet that goes on the frame to for the cadence pickup. So that's real simple. Everyone knows how to put magnet sensors on. And then as far as daily riding, we may have like a zero thing that you have to do. There's no pedaling backwards or any of this sort of calibration thing. There may be a 0 point set that you do daily, but we're really working to design that out as much as possible. The crankset is actually temperature compensated, and we have a 2-temperature calibration process for the production units at low temperature, high temperature, and that sets the calibration curve so that it to minimize the drift over temperature ranges, which means the 0 point should be very, very stable. Although all those things, we're working very hard over the next months to verify that everything's totally bomb-proof. It all works as we expect, and then when we're shipping next quarter, there's no surprises for everyone, and they just get on and ride them.
Availability next year?
Yeah,
retail.
First quarter next year. Retail on the sensor $11.95. Retail on the cranium $9.95.